Second Amendment debate. President Joe Biden unveils his first round of gun control measures. Capitol Hill filibuster. Why Democrats must count on Republicans to avoid a Senate stalemate. Shattered peace. See the violence rocking Northern Ireland. And preventing abuse. The Vatican looks at ways to protect children. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, April 8th, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. President Joe Biden calls for a national law to crack down on gun violence. It is one of the measures aimed at taking guns away from potentially dangerous people. But Second Amendment advocates worry that those actions will also penalize legal gun owners. And tonight we hear what position the Catholic Church takes. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Tracy, in the White House Rose Garden today, just hours after a South Carolina family was gunned down, President Joe Biden addressed what he calls the gun crisis and a public health crisis.
President Joe Biden lays out the deadly numbers.
Every day in this country, 316 people are shot every single day.
Alongside the president in a socially distanced Rose Garden, Vice President Kamala Harris and Attorney General Merrick Garland.
And today I'm announcing several initial steps my administration is taking to curb this epidemic of gun violence.
Among the actions being taken, tighter regulations for handmade ghost guns and pistol stabilizing braces.
A stabilizing brace shook in a pencil essentially makes that pistol a hell of a lot more accurate than a mini rifle. As a result, it's more lethal.
The recent mass shootings across the country, chilling reminders.
I am under no illusions about how hard it is to solve the problem of gun violence.
But the National Rifle Association reacting with this tweet. Biden announced multiple extreme gun control actions. These actions could require law-abiding citizens to surrender lawful property and push states to expand gun confiscation orders. Earlier this week, I asked White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki about the administration's plan to address violence in places like Chicago.
I appreciate you raising it because one thing we don't talk about enough is the fact that beyond mass shootings, there are additional people who die in cities, sometimes young kids, nearly every single day as a result of violence.
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has also weighed in on gun violence and gun control, urging the faithful to, quote, confront the pervasive culture of violence, and writing, the Church has been a consistent voice for the promotion of peace at home and around the world, and a strong advocate for the reasonable regulation of firearms.
In his speech today, President Joe Biden also urged Congress to act on gun control. The president said, quote, enough prayers, time for some action. The NRA also tweeted, it's ready to fight. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
During President Biden's inauguration speech, he spoke about his eagerness to work with both parties in Congress. But Senate Republicans say so far it has been the Democrats' way or the highway, from passing the COVID relief bill to the president's latest infrastructure proposal. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has more.
Senate Republicans are firing back after President Joe Biden said in a recent speech that Republicans didn't want to spend enough money to help the American people while negotiating the last COVID relief bill. So Democrats had to do it alone.
If they come forward with a plan that did the bulk of it, it was $1.3 billion or $4 billion, 2 or 3, that allowed me to have pieces of all that was in there, I would have been prepared to compromise. But they didn't. They didn't move an inch. Not an inch.
10 Senate Republicans who worked together to draft a 6th COVID-19 relief bill earlier this year are speaking out. Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota is one of them.
Well, we were very disappointed when we heard that he basically said we gave him, a my way or the highway approach. We went in good faith. We just wanted to make it clear to the American people that that is not what happened. It's not the way that we saw it.
Republicans say their package included the core COVID relief elements of the Biden administration's plans, such as providing an identical amount, $160 billion, to support vaccines and testing. In addition, he says Republicans later upped their offer to $650 billion to increase the size of the stimulus checks. Senator Round says the Biden administration dismissed their efforts. Republicans are still concerned Senate Democrats will attempt to use another simple majority vote to pass the American Jobs Plan, now that the Senate parliamentarian decided reconciliation could be used again. But will they have the votes? Democratic Senator Joe Manchin said in a recent op-ed that he's against using reconciliation to pass bills, and he's also against getting rid of the filibuster in the Senate. Pro-life organizations like the Susan B. Anthony list say that they commend Senator Joe Manchin for standing strong, and that the filibuster protects pro-life values. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Protests continue in Myanmar, also known as Burma, following the military coup earlier this year. In one town, villagers began before dawn with songs and candles. They then marched down rural roads to protest the takeover. Protests began back in February, soon after the military seized power. Since then, nearly 600 demonstrators have been killed. Joining us now to talk more about the situation there is Eric Patterson, Vice President of the Religious Freedom Institute. Eric, thank you so much for joining us. Great to be with you. For those who may not recall, remind us, how and why did this military takeover begin?
Well, military rule is nothing new in Burma. They've had military rule off and on since 1962, and then elections in 2011. But there were elections last fall, and the military stepped in very strongly on February 1st and essentially has clamped down on the country with all of the violence that you just mentioned. It's deplorable.
And what's the status of the government leaders who were in place before this coup took place? Where are they now? What do we know?
The civilian leaders are largely under house arrest, and it's a very confusing situation. Their lawyers will get phone calls from unmarked numbers ordering them to be in such and such a place for a court date, and they're being shuffled around. Many of the rest of us on the outside, or even leaders there in the country, aren't sure in which house or which jail certain civilian leaders are being held. The regime there is claiming that it's doing this in the interest of national unity and national security, but it's clearly a blow to civilian government.
And we understand there also have been some developments regarding the Myanmar ambassador in the United Kingdom who has spoken out against the military takeover. What exactly can you tell us about that?
In a truly remarkable set of events, the ambassador to the United Kingdom has, over a period of time, been supportive of civilian government and of the protests. And so he was locked out today from being able to return to work. The deputy ambassador took control. The military ordered him to lock out the current ambassador. And so he has been standing out in the street in tennis shoes and a coat and talking to the media, the global press, about the horrible things that are going on in his country. He's one of many people who's a witness to the suffering and to the heavy-handed tactics of this military regime.
Another thing I want to talk about is the role the Catholic Church and faith leaders are playing in the protests. There was that now famous picture, I'm sure you recall, of a religious sister standing up to soldiers. Can you talk about that?
Yes, the people of all faiths, but in particular Christians and Catholics in the country have played a vital role. One of the things that's amazing is to see Catholic laity and Catholic religious orders with the Hunger Games symbol, which has become the symbol of the democratic protests, or with signs just calling for the golden rule or for Christ's love to be exercised here. The local Cardinal Bo, has issued a number of statements, but it's really been citizens in the streets kneeling in prayer, kneeling in front of the military to try to stop them from harming their fellow citizens, bringing food and water to the protesters, and calling on the government to stop literally massacring its own citizens.
Eric, before I let you go, has there been any response that we know of from the Biden administration? And what do you think the U.S. and other countries should do?
Well, the Biden administration did impose some minor sanctions on some key Burmese officials. But they're playing a bit of catch up. The Obama administration prematurely got rid of many sanctions back in 2015. The Trump administration did impose sanctions on specific high-ranking leaders 3 years ago. But here's what should be done. First, we need to do economic statecraft with some of the countries with high levels of investment there. Countries like Japan, Singapore, and of course, China. Some of these are our close allies. They need to divest or stop the payments to this regime. This is a regime that has a military that's tightly wound into its economics, owning ports and businesses. So going after those assets is one way to do economic statecraft. And of course, we should label the activities against the Rohingya Muslims in the west of the country as genocide and bring the full power of the international community diplomatically to stop that crisis as well.
Well, Eric, we have to leave it right there. Thank you so much for your time today. Eric Patterson, Vice President of the Religious Freedom Institute. Thank you again.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, the State Department says the Biden administration will restore more than $200 million in foreign aid to the West Bank and Gaza.
U.S. foreign assistance for the Palestinians serves important U.S. interests and values, including providing critical relief to those in need, fostering economic development, and supporting Israeli-Palestinian understanding, as well as security and stability in a volatile region.
The Trump administration had stopped these funds in 2018. Pro-Israeli lawmakers say U.S. law prohibits direct aid to the Palestinian Authority. While authorities in Northern Ireland are condemning another night of street violence in Belfast.
Over 55 police officers have been injured in over 36 incidents of disorder, deliberately designed to draw the police into areas to be attacked as they try to protect the community.
Unrest has erupted over the past week, largely in loyalist Protestant areas. There are rising tensions over the post-Brexit trade rules, and relations are worsening between the parties in the Protestant Catholic power-sharing Belfast government. In northern Mozambique, ISIS is claiming responsibility for the gruesome slayings of 12 people. 12 people were found beheaded at a lodge which was looted. A rebel attack in the city of Palma killed 50 people 2 weeks ago. 5 regional leaders are calling a new summit to confront the 4-year insurgency, which has claimed more than 2,600 lives. Well, today is the World Day for Child Sexual Abuse Prevention. The Vatican has joined Harvard University to sponsor a 3-day online symposium on abuse prevention and treatment. It is one of several efforts to combat and prevent child sexual abuse. Caterina Fuchs, Associate Professor at the Pontifical Gregorian University, joins us now from Rome to tell us more. Welcome, Caterina. Thank you so much for coming on. Can you tell us about the recent international webinar at which you spoke? What was your message to the participants?
Well, my main message in the webinar that was organized last week by WUCO in various languages was that we need to be aware of the shadow pandemic within the COVID-19 pandemic. We are living for more than 1 year now. So it means that during this last year, especially in times of lockdown, of social isolation and quarantine, the numbers of child maltreatment, child abuse, online and offline, as well as domestic violence have increased. So everybody needs to be aware of that. And I'm really of the opinion that everybody can contribute to create a culture of awareness and sensitivity and a safer place for children and adolescents, especially in times of COVID-19.
Can you talk about how the church has collaborated with other organizations in order to raise awareness and, of course, protect the children?
Well, there has been various contributions and collaborations over the last years. Just to mention the one of WUPO, the World Union of Catholic Women Organization, but also during the webinar, the president of the National Organization of Catholic Men joined us. So also there is some kind of collaboration. And of course, as Pope Francis always asked for, there is a need of an international, multicultural, interdisciplinary and interorganizational collaboration. And therefore, the Church should also collaborate, as she already does, for example, with other universities, with DADL, with private, so with secular universities, for example, with research institutes, but also, for example, with NGOs and other kinds of institutions and organizations that are committed to safeguarding and to the prevention of any kind of maltreatment and abuse of minors.
We don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to ask you this. As mentioned, there has been a rise in reports of child abuse. What do you think has led to that increase, and what can be done to stop it?
Well, there has been an increase all around the globe over the last year, which is linked to the pandemic, and as I said before, to periods of lockdown. So there have been limited access to social services, to help, limited access to activities, less occasions to meet other people and to talk. And so there's an increase that varies between 20 and 50% for maltreatment, for domestic violence and abuse. Online, it's even more in some countries. And what we need is really awareness of that. And then especially prepared people, be they professional, be they lay people, to help, to intervene, to ask how children and young people are doing, and then to link them or to offer also professional help if they need.
Oh, Katerina, thank you so much for talking to us about this very important subject. Katerina Fuchs, Associate Professor at the Pontifical Gregorian University. Thank you again.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Coming up, gender debate, the push to protect children from experimentation, and Day of Remembrance for the Holocaust. Tennessee's legislature is moving a bill that requires aborted baby remains to receive a burial or cremation. It would exempt hospitals. Pro-lifers favor its protection of human dignity. Indiana's pioneering law has already been upheld by the Supreme Court, and now at least 10 states have similar laws. Lawmakers in Arkansas have overridden the veto of a bill that prohibits gender transitioning procedures for children. The state Senate passed the measure last month, but on Monday, Republican Governor Asa Hutchinson vetoed it, citing government overreach. However, the very next day, both the Arkansas House and the Senate voted overwhelmingly to override his veto. Joining us now is Matt Hadra, Washington, D.C. correspondent for Catholic News Agency. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. First off, let's talk about the Arkansas State Legislature overriding the governor's veto. That's pretty significant. What are your thoughts on that? And were you surprised that the governor vetoed the bill, considering his record on things such as life issues and conscious rights?
Well, it is significant, especially given the overwhelming vote to override the veto. Governor Hutchinson did sign bills into law recently that banned people from participating in women's sports based on their gender identity, banning almost all abortions in the state, establishing conscience protections for healthcare professionals. So in that respect, his veto does come somewhat of a surprise. And he's the second Republican governor recently to veto a transgender law. Governor Kristi Noem in South Dakota vetoed a transgender sports law there. So we are seeing, somewhat of a divide in the party on this issue.
Matt, tell us what this measure does, and have any faith groups of church leaders weighed in on it?
So the measure prohibits doctors from performing gender transition procedures on anyone under the age of 18, except in very rare cases of chromosomal abnormalities. So gender transition procedures, this includes things like cross-sex hormones, puberty blocking drugs, and gender transition surgeries. And insurers are also prohibited from covering these procedures. Now, the Catholic Diocese of Little Rock did release a statement earlier this afternoon saying that they took no specific stand on the law. They said that they uphold the church's teaching that, except in very rare cases of medical abnormalities, that one's gender conforms to their biological sex, and that cannot be changed. The diocese said that whether this law is the best way to uphold this church teaching is up for debate, and they did not take a specific stand on it. The diocese did add that bullying, harassment, violence against LGBT youth is wrong and must be opposed, and it's not inconsistent to both oppose that while also upholding the church's teaching on gender and human sexuality.
Now that this bill is going to become law, what's next? I understand that the ACLU is already gearing up for a fight.
Yes, the ACLU has vowed to challenge the law. It's also challenging bills in other states. And, we are seeing bills percolate in other states, such as North Carolina. A bill has been introduced to restrict gender transition procedures for people under the age of 21. There's also a bill in Oklahoma that would ban people from participating in women's sports if their birth sex is male. So we are seeing bills pop up in other states, and it's going to be an ongoing issue.
Matt, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it. Matt Hadro from Catholic News Agency. Thank you again. Today marks the 70th annual commemoration of Holocaust Remembrance Day. It is called Yom HaShoah. The day marks the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising of 1943. Despite the Day of Remembrance, many youth are unaware of the Holocaust. One recent study reveals that 63% of respondents did not know that 6 million Jews died in Hitler's Nazi genocide. Up next, the billion-dollar effort to rebuild Notre Dame Cathedral, and heavenly discovery, where two galaxies seem to collide. Next week marks the 2-year anniversary of the devastating fire at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. The church's massive vaulted ceiling is currently being supported by wooden pillars in case the stones give way. Work to rebuild the ceiling and the spire is expected to start later this year. More than $1 billion has been raised from 150 countries to restore the beloved cathedral. Well, this Sunday is Divine Mercy Sunday, and Pope Francis will offer Mass in a church containing the relics of St. John Paul II and St. Faustina Kowalska. This is the second year that the Holy Father has chosen to offer Mass at the Church of Santo Spirito in Sassia near St. Peter's Square. The church was transformed into a center for Divine Mercy spirituality in 1994 by Pope John Paul II. This Sunday's Mass is not open to the public. However, it will be live streamed. Well, the Vatican's Astronomical Observatory has a new website about scientific research. VaticanObservatory.org furthers its 130-year mission to show the Catholic Church's support of science. The homepage features a photograph of Pope St. Paul VI watching the television broadcast of the first moon landing back in 1969. The roots of the Vatican Observatory date back to the 16th century. Well, speaking of astronomy, the Hubble telescope has captured a rare cosmic spectacle. This image simulates brilliant flickering light from a rare pair of quasars as two galaxies collide. Hubble astronomers are excited because they also report a separate second pair of quasars. The findings are published in the online journal Nature Astronomy. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.